number 4 of the House of Commons Special Committee on Afghanistan. Pursuant to motion from the House adopted on December 8, 2021, and the motion adopted by the committee on December 13, 2021, the committee is meeting to study the humanitarian assistance measures in place to bring relief to the Afghan people. Today's meeting is taking place in hybrid format. Pursuant to House Order of November 25, 2021, members are attending in person and remotely using the Zoom application. The proceedings will be made available by the House of Commons website, so you are aware the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To ensure an orderly meeting, I would like to outline a few rules to follow. Please note that screenshots or taking photographs of your screen is not permitted. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. I'm going to make sure I have the right mark. And if the interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. For members participating in person, I hope there is one. Please keep in mind that the Board of Internal Economy guidelines for mask use and health protocols are in place. And as a chair, I will be enforcing these measures for the duration of this meeting. I thank you in advance for your cooperation. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. And when you are not speaking, please ensure that your microphone is on mute. Just a reminder to members and witnesses that comments should be addressed through the chair, even though I'm very lenient on this, you have probably noticed in the last meetings, but I would prefer that. I would now like to welcome our witnesses and express our appreciation for you all being with us today. Please note that witnesses have 5 minutes per organization for their opening remarks. From Afghan Women's Organization, or Refugee and Immigrant Services, we have Asma Fiazi. From Canadian Afghanistan Business Council, we have Aziz Amiri. From Canadian Red Cross, we have Amy Avis and Erica C. So on behalf of the committee, welcome again, witnesses, and I will start with Asma Fiazi for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and the committee for the opportunity to appear before you. For over 30 years, the Afghan Women's Organization, AWO for short, has been providing settlement services to newcomers to Canada with a special focus on women, their families, refugees, and people who have experienced war and persecution. AWO is also a sponsorship agreement holder and has been successfully resettled over 5,000 refugees from around the world. AWO is founded and led by Afghan women and is a staunch advocate for the human rights of Afghan women and girls. AWO has led several projects inside Afghanistan, including home-based and underground schools for Afghan girls, as well as educational and income generation projects for women. Currently, AWO runs an all-girls orphanage in Kabul. Since last summer, AWO has supported Afghan refugees that have been evacuated to Canada, is sponsoring vulnerable Afghan refugees to Canada, has provided support to vulnerable Afghans in Afghanistan, and has also been engaged in many advocacy efforts. We thank the Canadian government for its commitment to resettle 40,000 Afghan refugees and provide $50 million in humanitarian aid. This pledge reflects Canada's long-standing and continuous bipartisan support to encourage stability and respect for human rights in Afghanistan. Canada's investments have advanced tangible progress in the areas of health, education, and women and girls' rights. However, we are concerned that Canada's investments in Afghanistan are severely threatened due to the country's dire humanitarian crisis, which is fueled both by a lack of response on the part of the international community and the Taliban's inability to be an inclusive and representative government for all its people. The crisis inside Afghanistan is intensifying at an unprecedented rate. More than 3.5 million Afghans are internally displaced. 80% are women and children. 23 million people are in desperate need of food. At least 1 million children are at risk of dying due to severe acute malnutrition. Human rights are threatened with shrinking civic space. Women have been barred from working in certain sectors, their movement restricted, and higher education for women is uncertain. We are also concerned for women civil society activists that are being abducted and gender-based persecution of women. What is needed now is urgent action to protect those at risk and help address basic needs. Canada's humanitarian assistance objectives should ensure aid gets to the most vulnerable by easing restrictions on getting funds to independent and trusted NGOs and multilateral organizations. It should have a long-eye view that aid should be given in a way that opens up a pathway for reviving the economy and addressing development needs beyond preventing economic collapse. And in line with Canada's feminist foreign affairs practices and international assistance policy, work with Afghans in the diaspora to center the voice of Afghan women and local communities in the decisions about how resources will be dispersed. Many donors have generously donated to emergency relief efforts to deliver food and other basic necessities. However, these short-term measures are not enough since this is not a natural disaster. Afghans find themselves at the intersection of 4 decades of war imposed on them, political and economic instability, corruption, widespread human rights abuses, a global pandemic, back-to-back droughts in the past 4 years, and a harsh winter. Women and children have been at the front line and disproportionately affected. Afghanistan is also facing economic isolation, and many Afghans have not been paid for months and lack essential services. The World Bank's Afghanistan Reconstruction Trust Fund, a pool of aid to which Canada and other donors contributed, has unspent money which could be allocated immediately to health, education, and other social services. Some funding should be delivered to the public sector in areas such as agricultural support and village-level development programs. We should be empowering the local communities by providing them with tools and resources they need to help themselves. They should be involved in the decisions about their needs and how the resources should be dispersed, as well as community-based monitoring. To ensure that Afghans have the tools and resources they need, it is imperative that Canada increase its financial commitment to at least $100 million for 2022. In addition to supporting the public sector, we need to alleviate the pressure on the private sector. Afghanistan needs a viable economy because humanitarian assistance will never be sufficient or sustainable. A collapsing economy and extreme poverty will lead to another migration crisis, as well as providing an opportunity for groups like Daesh or ISIS-K to recruit people. At-risk Afghans, particularly women, children, and minorities, are in dire need of protection. Canada should remove the caps on the number of Afghan refugees that sponsorship agreement holders can sponsor, similar to what was done with the Syrian initiative. Lastly, in parallel to these other efforts, there's a need for continued political pressure on the Taliban to ensure there's an inclusive and representative government that respects human rights and allows the people to define what they want for the future of Afghanistan. Thank you for the opportunity. I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that, staying almost within the time limit. And now from the Canada Afghanistan Business Council, I would welcome Aziz Amiri. Please go ahead, 5 minutes for your opening remarks. Madam Clerk, do we have from Canada Afghanistan Business Council?
I believe they're still connecting. If you could go to the next witness, please.
Okay, sure. Thank you kindly. And from the Canadian Red Cross, please go ahead. Between two of you, you have 5 minutes for opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the invitation to address the distinguished members of the committee today. We welcome your attention to this critical humanitarian issue. My name is Amy Avis, and I'm the General Counsel for the Canadian Red Cross. I'm joined today by my colleague, Erica C., Senior Legal Advisor. The Canadian Red Cross is deeply concerned about the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan and the continued barriers to the provision of neutral, impartial, and independent humanitarian assistance. As has been well discussed in this forum, and as is previously highlighted to the committee by the ICRC, the situation in Afghanistan is extremely dire. Afghanistan is currently in the midst of a collapse, with communities facing a breakdown of health services and widespread hunger. Acute food shortages fueled by serious drought, lack of cash, internal displacement, and the COVID-19 pandemic have converged on the people in Afghanistan, with some 18 million Afghans in urgent need of humanitarian assistance. While we recognize and echo the need to take measures to prevent and respond to terrorist activities and other fund diversion, it's also imperative that neutral, impartial, and independent humanitarian assistance not be impeded. The Canadian Red Cross's knowledge and understanding of the complex context and operating environment has been developed with over a decade of work in Afghanistan in partnership with the Afghanistan Red Crescent Society in providing emergency response and health services to vulnerable populations. Due to the barriers in aid, Canadian Red Cross operations in Afghanistan are substantially on hold, and we've had to cease all operations. This includes the humanitarian operation for people in emergencies, the HOPE program, that provides critical primary healthcare services such as child health, immunization, childbirth, and postnatal care, to name a few. These services are provided through mobile health teams to some of the more remote and difficult areas to access across the country. The Canadian Red Cross and the Afghanistan Red Crescent Society are both part of the International Red Cross and Red Crescent movement, comprised of 192 national societies, the ICRC and the IFRC. Although we're certainly aware that it is not the Government of Canada's intention, it's our understanding that the current legal framework, inclusive of sanctions and anti-terrorism legislation and other regulations, can pose an obstacle to providing humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. We recognize that solutions can come in a number of forms, so we'll focus our testimony on the principles of what successful solutions could include. Our recommendations are as follows. Mindful of the UN Security Council Resolution 2615 in 2021, issue clarification on the scope and focus of the sanctions and expressly state that humanitarian activities or financial transactions in support of these activities would not be a violation of Canadian law like the US and Australia have. Action is needed to give force of law in Canada to intend to the resolutions. Remove further barriers within the sanctions regime could also include an express carve-out and that the regimes do not apply to humanitarian aid. This makes this solution applicable beyond Afghanistan. Thirdly, provide clarity to the humanitarian sector on permissible action within the current anti-terrorism legislation to combat the chilling effect of non-governmental organizations, the counterterrorism regime. Various models for actioning this have been discussed at the committee and beyond, such as an MOU or pre-budget submission. Putting form aside, a successful solution would include direction on permissibility. If it is determined appropriate and required, we would finally put forward to undertake a longer-term update of the criminal code to expressly and explicitly recognize the carve-outs for providing life-saving activities of neutral and impartial humanitarian assistance. The complexity of the current situation in Afghanistan presents immense challenges to the Government of Canada and to humanitarian organizations wishing to resume activities to provide life-saving aid. It's our belief that these recommendations could address urgent needs in Afghanistan and set a solid foundation for continued humanitarian action. Mr. Chair, thank you very much, and we look forward to any questions the committee may have.
Thank you very much, Ms. Avis. Appreciate that. Very well within the time frame. I appreciate that. It's my understanding that we do not have Mr. Aziz Amiri here yet from the Canada-Afghanistan Business Council.
I'm here.
You're here? You're here?
Yeah,
okay,
Mr.
that's
Chair.
great. I'm sorry.
That's right.
Great to have you here.
Thank you very much.
And without any further ado, you have 5 minutes. If you can start your watch, and please stay within the time frame, but I appreciate that for your opening remarks.
No problem. No problem.
Thank
Let
you.
me just set the time so I will not miss it. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I truly appreciate the opportunity to come and share my thoughts here. I would like to bring everyone's attention to a few points that I have. One is the first one is that we would like to see as a community that the number of refugees be increased from 40,000 to 100,000 at least. And Vietnam War, we have received 20,000 Vietnamese from 9 to 19. Sure, by now we have the capacity to receive a whole lot more people. Number two,
hold on, Mr. Amiri, hold on. Could you, Mr. Amiri, I seem like we are not getting you very clearly. If you can turn your picture off and just see if that works better, because your internet connection is not as secure. If you can turn the picture off and then see if it works better.
Okay.
And, okay, I put your time stop and we'll come back. Let the interpreter see if they can interpret clearly. Could you speak for a few minutes, please, a few seconds, please?
Attendez, Monsieur le Président, là, j'aimerais ça parler à...
Mr. Chair, I'd like to speak to our clerk, please. I'm not sure that we can do this without the image, so we have to be careful. Am I mistaken, Madam Clerk? I think we need to have the camera on.
Mais c'est plutôt pour des votes.
Well, that's for votes that we do need to be able to see the person. But just a moment, I think the technicians are on it.
I mean, I would love to see his picture, but Mr. Brunel Decep, I like to see that it's crisp and clear. That is why I just thought that, because he's a witness, right? So he's not voting as the clerk said. So, okay. You want to say a few things, Mr. Amiri, just to see if the interpretation comes clearly?
Yes. Maybe I will start by saying thank you very much for the opportunity that I've been received today.
Can you speak a little bit longer, please?
Okay. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to talk today with a panel and attract their...
No, Mr. Amiri, it's not coming up. Could you please try without the picture, see if we can hear you clearly?
Okay.
Just one more time. Go ahead, please, Mr. Amiri, again.
Yeah. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to discuss or to present a few points from the Business Council point of view, and as well as the community of Afghan Canadians in Canada to you, and would like to discuss and present ideas.
Thank you. Let me find out from the interpreter. Okay. Madam Clerk, could you see if the interpreters are okay with it?
They seem to be okay, yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, good. If I have the consent from the members, if we can have Mr. Amiri speak without the picture, are you okay, everyone? Okay, thank you, Mr. Amiri. We can. I'm going to restart because it was only 30 some seconds. We can reset. If you can start again, please, from the start. Would appreciate that. Please go ahead.
Okay. Again, once again, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. We would like to see the number of Afghan refugees coming to Canada to be increased from 40,000 to 100,000 people. Back in 1975 to 1982, Canada received over 120,000 Vietnamese during their war. And I'm sure that we have the capacity to receive a whole lot more than 40,000 of people that we know that their lives are in danger. Number two, the Business Council would like to see an allocation or quota for Afghan businesses and corporations that would like to come to Canada from Afghanistan. So Canada and us will be benefiting from their talents and investments. Number three, the third country requirement is fine. As we all know, the refugees need to be registered with UNHCR, which is very problematic. And we would like that recognition of UNHCR should be waived for Afghan refugees in order for us to sponsor them. Number four, Canadian government has sent substantial number of medical supplies in Syria during their war. We would like the Canadian government to do the same for Afghanistan. And also, we would like the Canadian government to charter 1, 2, 3 or more airplanes so we can collect donation from our community and other community to send to Afghanistan. My apologies. Number five, employees of Canadian companies in Afghanistan. We would like to have a quota for them to come here. Number six, the PR for extended family members of the and the translators program that there was from 2009 and 2012. We would like to request inclusion of their extended families in the program. Number seven, the pre-removal risk assessment for Afghanistan was issued or announced in October 2021. However, no refugee claimant who have received a negative decision have been yet accepted. We therefore request that all Afghan refugee claimants whose claims were formally refused be accepted. Number eight, due to unsubstantial political situation in Afghanistan, we request that all refugee claimants waiting for their protection person status here in Canada and those under the HNC PR application, humanitarian and compassionate ground, be accepted. Number nine, consider the crisis in Afghanistan. Afghan would like to be able to sponsor their parents. The current lottery program is lengthy, would therefore request a new stream of program to create and allow Afghans to sponsor their parents. Number 10, we would like to see more funding for the settlement offices or organizations to be able to settle the newcomers. However, the newcomers that are coming or have been coming has been greatly supported by our community. One thing that I would like to say, the last item, is that the Canada-Afghanistan Business Council is working on a portal where we could match the newcomers with the Afghan businesses in Canada. I will see my talk here, and I hope I haven't passed the point, and I will be open for any question. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amiri, and very well within the time frame as well. Now I would go to the honorable members. The first round is 6 minutes, and the members, if you can have your stopwatch going as well, so we can stay within the time limits first. And I will go to the Conservative member, Mr. Hallen, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. My questions are for Ms. Faizi. Your organization has helped settle many refugees, including refugees from Syria as well. My question to you is, before Kabul fell in August of 2021, was your organization ever in contact with IRCC or the Canadian government in any way, whether it was to tell them about, Kabul falling, or about any urgency or any urgent situations?
So we started to get involved in the summer around June, when we were approached by women parliamentarians and activists from inside Afghanistan, they had written a letter to us asking to bring to the attention of the Canadian government the dire situation that they were in. So we wrote to the government, and then there were some subsequent meetings throughout the summer.
What happened in those meetings? What were they about?
These meetings were more generally sort of debriefing meetings we had with a group of ministers, including ministers from immigration, international development, and GAC.
Was at any point with meeting them, was anything brought up about fast tracking any applications or just describing the crisis that was happening in Afghanistan?
Well, certainly. I mean, as a women's group we were getting calls daily from women that were inside Afghanistan. They were fearing for their lives. So we were trying to bring the attention of those women, the risk, and trying to get the Canadian government to be able to help them, whether it's through resettlement or some temporary program so that we could get them outside of Afghanistan. We also had a couple of calls with some senior policy folks at IRCC.
Did they promise any kind of action, and what kind of action if they did?
So I think because the situation unfolded so quickly, I think they themselves were caught off guard in terms of the magnitude of what was going on and the sort of fast manner in which the foreign troops and including Canada evacuated. I think it was a difficult situation, and unfortunately, we didn't get the people that we tried to help. Some of them were able to get out in other manners through U.S. mechanisms and others. Unfortunately, some of the people that we were trying to help, we were not able to help them.
And after that, after between August and October, were you ever in contact with them again, with those departments?
So we have been writing letters, and we have since the fall. We've had a meeting with the minister, Minister Fraser. We had a meeting with him in December. We've requested meetings from Minister Sajan and Jolie, and we haven't received those yet, any meetings yet, but we have met with the Minister of Immigration in December, and we have a follow-up meeting with their staff later this week.
What was that meeting about? Was anything asked by your organization, and have you seen any changes for that ask?
So we had raised the issue about the timeline because there are a lot of Afghans that are in immediate need, and the timeline that has been set to bring these 40,000 Afghans is 2023. So he urged on him to find a way to be able to expedite the process and make it sooner. For the Syrian refugees, we brought 25,000 in 100 days, and we're hoping that something could be done in that manner. That was one of our asks. The other ask was around the criteria that the government has set to bring the Afghans here. The criteria is quite narrow. And so a lot of the women that we were trying to help, they didn't meet the criteria under the special immigration program. For example, gender-based persecution is not captured. And so we were trying to ask the minister to revisit those criteria to ensure it's broader so that those additional people that we're trying to help could be brought to Canada. And so far we haven't received, so we're hoping that the follow-up this week, they're going to be able to tell us whether they've made any movements on these asks. And also to increase the cap, to remove the cap on sponsorship agreement holders to be able to bring Afghan refugees, because that's a big barrier on the private sponsorship holders such as ourselves. We've only been... Yes.
Sorry to cut you off. I just have a little bit of time left. I wanted to ask you, I would just say that this liberal made backlog in immigration is probably one of the reasons why these applications are not moving very fast, and that's a complaint we keep hearing over and over again. Do you have numbers of applications that you have before August 15th, 2021, and how many more applications you have today's date? What kind of processing times that you're seeing for those, and what kind of delay Could you table those with the committee, please?
Sure.
Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
You're on mute, Chair.
So your time is almost up now.
And also, if I could just ask her to also table where those applications are from. Are they from inside Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan, and the numbers of them, please?
Thank you kindly, and your time is up. And we can go to Ms. Fazi, if you can turn your mic off, please. Would appreciate. Thank you. And now I'm gonna go for 6 minutes to Madam Jahid. Please go ahead for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I would like to thank all the witnesses for appearing before the committee. My first question is for Mr. Amiri. Mr. Amiri, thanks for coming today. I'm very well aware of the work, good work you do under the organization Canada-Afghanistan Business Council, and thanks for your leadership on that. I would like to thank you for helping me better understand what is happening in Afghanistan, especially since the return of the Taliban. I know that you and your members have a lot of connection and insight into what is happening on the ground there. I would like to ask you, from the humanitarian aid perspective, is the aid getting through there to the people actually in Afghanistan, especially the medical aid, and what are the aid gaps in terms of the needs and the resources, and where should Canada be focusing its humanitarian aid efforts?
Go ahead, Mr. Amiri.
Thank you very much, Madam Zoed. I appreciate your leadership in the community here, and a lot of Afghan refugees and new immigrants are benefiting from your support and your hard work. No doubt that Afghanistan right now, we need a lot of help, and Afghanistan going through a very difficult time in history. People are starving, as we know. People are selling their kids and their organs for food. I'm sorry, but we need a lot. We need a lot of help. We want the government to be able to organize and help through United Nations, because many local NGOs, unfortunately, and unfortunately, some of the neighbors haven't been delivering the assistance properly. So our hope is that United Nations will get an active role in delivering those help. No doubt that medical supplies is needed, but this winter time, food and other supplies are much needed. And we are requesting Canada and other countries to help.
Thank you.
As far as channels goes, I believe that the United Nations would be the proper channel to help, aside from some other international NGOs. Thank you. My apologies.
Thank you, Mr. Amiri.
No
My next question is for Ms. Faizi. Ms. Faizi, I know the Afghan Women's Organization well, and I would like to thank you and Sister Adina Niazi and all your team for the important work you are doing. I would like to ask you about the situation for women and girls today in Afghanistan. Particularly, I'm concerned about the households with no male members, which can make it difficult or at times impossible for that household to go out and access the humanitarian aid. So could you please speak to the situation for women and girls and the situation for households without male members of the family? And what specific recommendations do you have for what Canada can do to make sure that humanitarian aid gets to those households?
Ms. Piazzi, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And thank you so much for your support of our organization. In terms of women, as Mr. Amiri has indicated, food scarcity is one of the biggest problems. So it's imperative that we're able to get aid inside Afghanistan through independent, trusted NGOs and multilateral organizations. Health, there's a lot of issues in terms of access to health. A lot of hospitals or healthcare facilities have shut down. A lot of the doctors have left, and so it's difficult for people to access, particularly women, to access healthcare and education. So, in terms of education, it's unclear whether or not higher education will be available and what types of restrictions might be put on women in terms of those. You've pointed rightly that women who do not have a male household, given the restrictions that Taliban have put on the movement of women who do not have a male, somebody to be able to escort them, is significantly more challenging. And so in terms of being able to meet those needs, we need to be able to have women healthcare, women to be able to provide healthcare to them, whether it's through mobile units, and also to be able to ensure that, put some pressure on the Taliban to ensure that they enable these women who do not have a male counterpart to be able to have access to much needed resources.
Thank you very much, Madam Jahid. You have only 5 seconds to go.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you again, and I appreciate that. And now we can go to our next honorable member, Mr. Brunel de Sepp, for 6 minutes, please.
Merci infiniment, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank all the witnesses who are here with us on this study that is very important. And as it was said, the focus is on the humanitarian crisis. And in the short term, how can we help people right now and in the near future? So, Mr. Amiri, I was really struck by your testimony. I'd like to ask you the first question. Last week, I asked the witnesses what the top priority was, or that should be, in this committee's report. So a number of them were named: suspending technical formalities, for example, and the forms that need to be filled in online, whereas people are currently dying, don't necessarily have to have the refugee status to sponsor someone from be a sponsor from Canada. And some other ones were mentioned as well for Pakistan to help Afghanistan. Are you in favor of all these recommendations? And if there was a number one priority, what would it be?
Go ahead, Mr. Amiri.
My sincere apologies, because when the honorable member started halfway, I did not turn on the English, so I did not get the half of the question. My apologies.
Okay, I'll give you 20 extra seconds, Mr. Brunel de Sepp, if you want to say again quickly.
Oui, ben merci. Ben j'espère qu'on va.
Yes. Well, I hope that we'll go back to the start of my time, Mr. Chair, right? We'll start 6 minutes starting now. Excellent. Let me start again. I would like Mr. Amiri, I would like him to hear this, because I'd like to thank all the witnesses who are here today with us. Mr. Amiri, for us, it is very important that we do this study, because we want to focus on the humanitarian crisis and what's happening right now and how we can help people right now and how we can help people in the short term. You really struck me with your testimony. And I'll come back to my question that I wanted to ask you. Last week, I asked the witnesses what their top priority was that they thought we should put in this committee's report. And there's been a number of them mentioned: suspending technical formalities, for example, forms to be filled out online, whereas people are risking death. It doesn't make sense. Not having to have a refugee status in order to sponsor someone. And witnesses asked us to have a presence on the ground, including in Pakistan, to help Afghans who want to come to Canada. I'd like to know what you think of these recommendations, and I'd like to know, in your opinion, what is the top priority for you for the recommendations given by this committee?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. First of all, in our view, top priority for us, for the Canada, should have assigned a special envoy for Afghanistan to coordinate whether it's humanitarian or refugees cases. This is very important because right now, all the effort is scattered all over, and one hand doesn't know what's happening with the other hand. That's number one. Number two, in our view, is transferring fund to Afghanistan. Unfortunately, we heard that the Biden administration is getting half of the money, which belongs to the people, the deposit of actual people. We don't want to make this political statement, but this is a very nonsense what they're doing. So we need fund. We need fund to go through reliable sources such as United Nations, such as big NGOs to go to Afghanistan. That could be distributed as cash, or that could be distributed as food. And it shouldn't go through, and it wouldn't go through the government, the current government there. So these are the as far as the humanitarian. As far as the refugees, one thing that we keep asking for the last 6 months now is the requirement of the recognition of the United Nations or UNHCR. This is really tough. This is very difficult. We would like that to be abolished, at least, or waived for now, because as long as any Afghan is outside, we know that he's in danger. So for him to require him to go and get a United Nations card, it's very, very difficult. So that's another requirement, or you were saying that previous panel or previous witnesses have suggested, we strongly believe that is the case. That should be waived. Thank you.
Merci, Monsieur Amiri.
Thank you, Mr. Amiri. I'd like to speak to our friends from the Canadian Red Cross. A number of witnesses over the last week suggested that the criminal code needs to be changed so that NGOs can operate in Afghanistan without fear of being accused of helping terrorism. They were saying that it could happen through a motion, and Canada would have to promise to these NGOs that they wouldn't sue them. I feel that this is making things difficult for you, and I'd like to have your opinion on that.
Ms. Savis and Ms. C for the answer, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'll start and I'll turn it over to my colleague, Erica. I think you're exactly right. I think that the fear of the regulation or the legislation and how it'll be interpreted is having a chilling effect. And so although that we don't really read in any express impermissibility in the legislation, I think that what we're looking for is the confidence that we can kind of take it forward and not be reprimanded for providing humanitarian assistance. And so I think that in the interim, and I think that there's the pre-budget submission that's been floated, I think that there's been MOUs that have been floated. And so there's a multitude of solutions, but the thing that would be most helpful for us is just some sort of express permissibility with regards to the ability to take humanitarian action. And I'll turn over to my colleague, Erica, if she'd like to complement.
So if I base this on what you just said, if tomorrow I go to the House of Commons and I was here in the committee and I've got members here from all parties, tomorrow in the House of Commons, if I table a motion and ask for the government to give its word that it will not sue the NGOs following the work that they do on the ground, I know that that won't necessarily be evidence in a courtroom, but from the point of view, well, from your point of view, this could be something that could be done quickly that would give you the opportunity to act on the ground. Is that right?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Mr. Ruler, the time is up, and I was very generous. And now we can move to our next honorable member, Madam Kwan, for 6 minutes, please. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for their presentations, as well as for the ongoing advocacy and work that you do. I'd like to first ask Ms. Frazee a question. With respect to resettlement support, getting people to safety, the reality is that the current streams cannot be applied to many people. Many people are still within Afghanistan, and the stream that the government's provided is that you need to be in the third country. So in the face of this situation, what specific recommendation do you have for the government so that we can ensure that people who are in Afghanistan would be able to access resettlement supports?
So we've been asking for this for to ensure that they open up the ability of Afghans from inside Afghanistan to be able to seek resettlement. There was a short window where they had opened it, and then it's unclear as to why, but they shut it out. So it's very important. I can give an example. Just in the last couple of weeks, I've had a number of organizations, Canadian organizations, that are wanting to help some women that are trapped inside Afghanistan, that are in hiding, but they're inside Afghanistan. So they were calling me to say, well, what are our options? And unfortunately, the pathways that are open for those kinds of cases, they need to be outside of the country. So Canada needs to enable that once again, to allow Afghans from inside Afghanistan to be able to apply for the program, resettlement program.
When you say that there was a short window, do you recall when that window was?
I believe it was in October. It was a 2-week window. We were informed that they were going to lift to allow the vulnerable Afghans to be able to seek resettlement. And then a couple of weeks later, we found out that it was no longer available.
I see. And did you have any information as to how, even in that period of the 2-week window, how people would be able to access that initiative?
So my understanding was that they had partnered with, the government had partnered with some organizations on the ground that were going to be referral organizations. I believe Frontline Defenders, and there was I believe there was another organization that were designated as referral agencies that would identify those in need, and then they would be able to apply to be resettled in Canada.
One of the issues that was raised, and it was Mr. Armeni who indicated that the requirement of the UNHCR refugee determination is an impossible thing for people to attain. And have you called on the government to waive this requirement?
Yes, all of our recommendations to the government so far have asked for the waiver of that recognition status. It is a huge barrier. There's other examples. We get calls every day from, because of our connections and the fact that we've been working in this area for a long time, and that we're an Afghan organization, we get multiple calls from people who want to be able to sponsor somebody through the G5 or Group of 5, and you need to have to be recognized by the UNHCR or the host country. And while we understand that UN is operating in some of these third countries, they have a huge backlog. They're not processing. It's a huge barrier for a lot of people.
Will you be able to table for the committee all the recommendations that you've made to the government so that we have a record of that and their response to you to date?
Yes.
Thank you. The other question that I'd like to ask, which is this: for many people, the requirement of having to fill out all of these forms, with the stream, even if you're in a third country, the requirement is that you have to fill out all these forms within 14 days. That too is almost an impossible task for people, and people can't access computers. There's language barriers and so on. Would you support the call for the government to waive the requirements of all of these application process requirements, and to pause it, so to speak? And once people get to safety on Canadian soil, then we can always go back and fill out these forms and go through that process.
Certainly, any administrative barriers that have been put need to be alleviated. Like I said, we were able to bring 25,000 Syrians in 100 days. It's we want, so as far as we know, there's more than about 7,000 people that have come so far in Canada. There is a dire humanitarian catastrophe. There are people at risk, even those that are able to get out of Afghanistan and go to third countries, the horrific conditions under which they get to the countries, the horrific conditions under which they are in those third countries, for fear of being deported, persecuted, fear of being persecuted because they're going to be returned to Afghanistan. It's, just the human dignity requires the world to see what's going on and to alleviate these administrative burdens on people that are at risk.
One of the issues is about sponsorship. And aside from the private sponsorship, should the Canadian government be opening up family sponsorship for extended families? Because there are many Afghans who have Canadian family members here, but the sponsorship requirements is only for parents and grandparents or spouse and dependent children. Should the Canadian government open that up to extended family members?
Thank you, Madam Khan. Your time is up. And
could I just, Mr. Chair, just get a quick response?
Sure, please. Go ahead. Please, quick.
Yes, definitely. And they did it for the interpreters and their families that came. They expanded the definition of extended family, and I think that if that could be extended, that would be great. But we do understand that the Canadian government has been expediting some of these family reunification cases. So we thank them for doing that, but to expand the criteria would be very helpful.
Thank you very much.
You are on mute, Chair.
I think he said it's my turn. Thank you.
No, yes. It's not. No, I'm not going to take it on. So I'm going to do it but now I have 6 minutes left. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1 minute. So that's the round. So I'll go ahead with the
point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair. As I understand it, the next round is conservative round for 5 minutes.
I understand, but I was going to be fair on the first.
Well, what's fair is that all members on the committee get equal time, proportionate to their standings in the House of Commons, and according to the routine motions adopted by this special committee at its first meeting, Mr. Chair.
That's why, Mr. Chong, I was doing 2 minutes to Conservatives, 2 minutes to Liberals.
Yeah, but
1 minute, 1 minute. I mean, if you're not.
With respect, Mr. Chair, both the New Democratic member on this committee and the Bloc Québécois member on this committee have had a full round. I've not yet had a full round.
Okay, Mr. Chong, go ahead then.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Sure, no problem.
The motion establishing this committee was both a forward-looking and backward-looking motion. The forward-looking element of the motion was to examine the humanitarian assistance that's required on the ground. And so to that end, I'd like to ask about United Nations Security Council Resolution 2615, which was sponsored by the United States, which calls for a carve-out to the sanctions against the Taliban for humanitarian assistance. So my question is twofold. First, has the resolution been implemented in Canada? And if not, what is the expected timeline for implementation? And my second question is, what other countries have implemented Resolution 2615 to date?
Okay.
For any of the witnesses.
Go ahead. Any of the witness? Ms. Davies? Yeah, go ahead.
Erica, go ahead. Sure. Thank you for the question, Honorable Member. I don't think I can answer your question as to the current status in Canada. I could speak to the second part of your question regarding the implementation of UN Resolution 2615 in Canada. As the Honourable Member is undoubtedly aware, that resolution was passed in the very closing days of 2021. And I believe that member states are in a process of implementing the measure in alignment with their own domestic
So can you tell us
implementation.
Can you tell us which other countries have implemented Resolution 2615 in their national policies?
It's a very good question, honorable member. I think that the implementation methodology has varied by the jurisdiction. In some jurisdictions, there were preliminary statements that were offered to clarify the implementation. I'll just answer your question. So for example, in Australia, they made a government statement in the lead up to and in recognition of the fact that regulations tend to take time to be revised. In other jurisdictions, like in the United States that you mentioned was involved in the proposal of the resolution itself, they took the time immediately thereafter to partially implement a finance-oriented, what they called a general license through the Department of Treasury. So it really varies by the jurisdiction.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. If you have any more information on that, if you could transmit it to the clerk of the committee for all members, I would appreciate that. I'd like to ask a more backward-looking question, since the motion adopted by the House ordering this committee to be set up asked us to study what went wrong in the evacuation of people from Kabul by Canada before and during the fall of Kabul. NATO evacuated some 70,000 people leading up to August 25th. And one of the NATO members, for example, the United Kingdom, evacuated over 11,000 people in the weeks leading up to August 25th. The government of Canada appears to have been slow and disorganized in evacuating people from Kabul in the period leading up to the end of August. It looks like there's some 2,000 to 3,000 people that were evacuated in the weeks leading up to the end of August. And so my question is twofold. Can any of the witnesses here tell us if they brought this issue to the attention of the government before the fall of Kabul and when they did that? And secondly, could you comment on provide general comment on the government's evacuation efforts in the period ending at the end of August of last year?
30 seconds for the answer, please. Go ahead, anyone. They can raise their hand and I can acknowledge you. I guess, Mr. Chong, you have a particular fellow that you want to ask the question to?
No, it's okay, Mr. Chair. If they don't have any comment to provide, that's fine. Thank you.
And I'm going to call your time to be up. Thank you very much. On behalf of all the committee members, I would like to thank the witnesses for their time and their effort and the knowledge that they brought together to this committee. I really appreciate it. Thank you kindly. And I will put a stop here. And now, Madam Clerk, once the witnesses go away, then I have a question. second panel. Madam Clerk, all the witnesses are here. Thank you. I would like to make a few comments for the benefit of the new witnesses. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. When you are ready to speak, you can click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. And please choose whichever choice you want. If interpretation is lost, please inform me immediately and we will ensure interpretation is properly restored before resuming the proceedings. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. When you are not speaking, your microphone should be on mute. On behalf of the committee members, now I would like to welcome our witnesses and express our appreciation for you all being with us today. Please note that the witnesses have 5 minutes each for their opening remarks. That is per organization. So as individuals, we have with us is retired Major General Mr. David Fraser. Also with us is retired Major General Mr. Dean Milner. And from Veterans Transition Network, we have Mr. Oliver Thorne and also people to assist the Veterans Transition Network. I welcome you all, and I will start with the opening remarks from retired Major General Fraser. Please go ahead for 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you this evening. I am Major General David retired Fraser. I spent 32 years in the Canadian Armed Forces and participated in numerous missions, including as Commander, Regional Command South under the U.S.-led coalition Operation Enduring Freedom and the NATO coalition ISAF in 2006. Throughout my experience, and before I go on, can everyone hear me? Am I coming across? We'd hate to do this twice.
Excellent.
Operating on any mission is difficult because of a number of factors. The security threat is always paramount. However, this is compounded by language and culture. Afghanistan was one of the most complex missions Canada has ever engaged in. Nowhere were we more dependent on interpreters and cultural advisors as we were in Afghanistan. And I only have to remind you about what is going on in the Ukraine today, about the need that we have to be able to communicate and the need for interpreters. Afghanistan is a complex society with many different ethnic groups and tribes, and add to this the regional players, and all do not have English as their first language. Canada went into Afghanistan to fight an insurgency and rebuild a nation to the Afghan desires. This necessitated the employment.
What's that video?
This necessitated the use of interpreters to communicate both what the Afghans wanted and what we could do for them. Dialogue was key over what most people saw on the TV screens, which was an inordinate amount of combat. This combat was tragically the desire of the Taliban, who wanted to overthrow the democratically elected Afghan leadership. I want to emphasize over and above the language challenge that we had at my level, right down to the soldier level, our understanding of a culture which took up most of our time. As commander of a 9-nation coalition, I needed an interpreter, but more importantly, I needed cultural advisors who could tell me more than what the words were being spoken. Commanders at all levels and soldiers on the ground needed to be nuanced in the culture that was very different than what we have here in Canada. Offending somebody was easily done, and the damage took a long time to repair. Without these interpreters, cultural advisors, Canada simply could not have done what we did. We did much, but this is not the purpose of the commentary today. Canada's contribution, which was significant, could not have been effective without these people. While we started with interpreters, the groups of affected Afghans goes beyond this group. We provided opportunities that you and I take for granted in this nation: education, freedom of elections, and who can access these? Women, LGBTQ, ethnic groups, to name just a few, gained new liberties and freedoms. We assisted Afghans build a more inclusive society. 20 years after the international community has involved itself, the Taliban cannot do what they did in 1999, which is making it harder for them to turn the clock back. This is a fact of what we did working with Afghans. We provided them hope. We created a moral contract with them about what it means to be free. And in their whole hour of need, we need to stand by them, and which we stand as Canadians. In July, two other generals, Dean Milner and Dennis Thompson, saw the potential what could happen. We penned a letter to the implicated ministers asking them to create a pipeline to evacuate vulnerable Afghans. I hope that you've had time to talk to Major General Dennis Thompson, in addition to Dean and I, because he has a lot to say on this subject. Tragically, our assessment in that letter came true. And today there is a humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan as the Taliban regime had taken over. The consequence of these actions means that we need to provide a pathway out of that country for these adversely affected people and their families. When we started, we were tracking just over 100 interpreters. Once we got going and once we joined forces with Aman Laura, which means sheltered path in Pashto, Journalists for Human Rights, Building Markets, the Afghan Interpreters, and the Veterans Transition Network, our numbers grew. We are now close to please, Mr. Chair, if I've listened to you people talk for this long, I will ask if you can just allow me as a witness to provide you the information that this committee has asked me and my fellow people to give you so that we can inform Canadians about a humanitarian crisis that this country is not picking up and lifting its weight for.
Mr. Fraser, you had 5 minutes. We did not take your time. We gave you 5 minutes, and you will have time to say things when you're asked questions, and you can submit in writing. So, Mr. Fraser, thank you very much for your time, and I'm going to go to our next witness, Mr. Milner, for 5 minutes, please. Go ahead. We can't hear you, Mr. Milner. Seems like there's some technical difficulty.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could, since Dean Milner and I wrote the letter together and we have prepared the written statement, which you have, I could finish my statement if that is acceptable to you and the rest of the members. Over.
I don't have a consent on that, Sorry, Mr. Fraser, I gave you 5 minutes. I have to look into Mr. Milner because he has 5 minutes to speak as well as an individual. Mr. Milner, can you hear me? Hello? Mr. Milner. Seems like we have some difficulty. We can go to the next witness, and then we can come back to Mr. Milner when the technical team finishes. So I will go to Mr. Oliver Thorne for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? General Milner, there may be a mute button on the headset as well if you receive one from the Government of Canada. So even if you unmute in the program, there may be a little remote along the wire. That might be the issue. Mr. Chair and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Oliver Thorne. I'm the Executive Director with the Veterans Transition Network, which is a registered Canadian charity that until very recently, our entire focus was delivering mental health programs, counseling programs for veterans of the Canadian Forces and RCMP. I'll try and keep my statement brief to the background of our involvement in the Afghan campaign and the key takeaways that we've learned working on this over the previous 6 months. So first and foremost, as I said, our organization typically runs counseling programs for Canadian veterans. We have a network of veterans and graduates across Canada that we are in close contact with. In July, we were approached by Generals Fraser, Milner, and Thompson, who were forming a group of concerned veterans and organizations known as ASET, the Afghan Strategic Evacuation Team. They were working to help prepare and support the government evacuation that was going to take place after the fall of Kabul, and asked if the Veterans Transition Network could become involved as the financial arm to raise funds and issue tax receipts to support that effort. So we joined that effort early in August. Initially, our goal was to raise 500,000 Canadian to support a small number of safe houses for the 100 individuals that General Fraser spoke about earlier. Over the course of the middle of August, Afghanistan entirely fell to the Taliban much faster than anticipated, and so all of our efforts were kicked into very high gear. So throughout that time, through our fundraising efforts, we funded an individual that you may know as Canadian Dave, who's a former Special Forces operator with the Canadian Forces, who took a team to the Hamid Karzai International Airport and assisted the evacuation efforts there. Also operated a number of safe houses, providing shelter for people who had come from outlying areas within Afghanistan into Kabul in preparation for the evacuation. After the government airlift ended, there were very limited options for individuals to get out of the country. So again, with Dave and with the rest of the ASET team, we also continue to fund our own evacuation efforts. To date, the fundraising campaign has raised $4.5 million. Almost 3.5 have gone directly to those safe houses and to the evacuation efforts that we spoke about or that I mentioned just now. To date, we estimate, our best estimate is that we've supported the evacuation of 892 individuals through the funding that we've raised and through the organizations that General Fraser talked about in his statement. The takeaways that I think we have from this effort is first that the Canadian Forces veterans are deeply invested in helping their Afghan interpreters. As General Fraser spoke about, these individuals worked alongside Canadian Forces personnel in the same vehicles, wearing the same uniforms, and they were not just interpreters, they were cultural advisors, and in many cases, their local information and knowledge helped save Canadian lives. In addition to that, Canadians are supportive of Canadian veterans, and so by extension, they are very supportive of the Afghans that we are trying to help. And this is evident through the incredible response to this fundraising campaign and this evacuation campaign across Canada. The Canadian government, point three, the Canadian government was not prepared for the collapse of the Afghan government and the resulting humanitarian crisis. The result was a hasty announcement of an immigration program that IRCC was not sufficiently prepared or staffed to execute. Point four, risk aversion on the part of the Canadian government has resulted in policy that has tied the hands of hardworking government employees who are doing their best to execute and assist this evacuation effort, but policy has hogtied them. And finally, the result is that Canadian veterans, the public, and charities have stepped in to fill this void at their own risk, financially and otherwise, in order to support this effort. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thorne. Very well within the time frame. And can I check one more time before I go to the honorable members if Mr. Milner, Mr. Miller, yes, we can hear you now.
Well, that's
Mr. Miller,
great.
good. You have 5 minutes to go. Please go ahead.
Okay. It must be the fact that I'm in Mexico or something like that. But anyway, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, my name is retired Major General Dean Milner. Thanks for this opportunity to provide some feedback I will try and be brief, as I've heard some great points from both David and Oliver. The bottom line is very passionate about what happened in Afghanistan. I was the last commander in Kandahar, commanded our warfighting mission, and I was also the last commander that left Afghanistan in 2014 when I sadly had to give the Canadian flag to our ambassador when we left with all of our forces from the training mission in 2014. I joined a team along with the two other generals, Dave Fraser and Dennis Thompson, and a number of others, mostly former military personnel, to assist with the evacuation of our interpreters and those that had so graciously worked for us over in Afghanistan. During my couple of years, I could not have done the mission. I couldn't have completed the mission without these tremendous Afghans that served alongside of us, fought alongside of us. We lost many of those great Afghans. So the bottom line is I dearly support those great Afghans and really wanted to make sure this government moved ahead and tried to evacuate them. We didn't do that well. I'll be very honest. I think the 3,000 that we managed to evacuate before the air bridge was closed due to bureaucracy along Immigration Canada and the fact that there was not clear leadership. There was not a clear plan. It was very difficult for us to support and assist the mission. So really, we only managed to pull out maybe about 15 to 17% of those critical interpreters that soldiered alongside of us. After that, we continued to push for some kind of leadership. We really wanted somebody to take the ball. That did not happen. We really continued to seek the efforts of the government, and we were prepared to assist. But again, it's been a very, very slow, arduous process. We've moved out maybe 200 here, 150 there. It is very difficult. The bureaucratic paperwork process is far too slow. We keep hearing that there's going to be leadership, somebody's going to take charge, but there's really nobody taking charge. Canada can do a lot better than this. We have 10,000. The Prime Minister said we're going to move out 40,000. 40,000. We have maybe moved out maybe 4,500. Not enough. It's inexcusable. We need to move out more Afghans. Those soldiers, it's a moral obligation. We need to do better. Other countries maybe they've done a lot better than us. So I really am asking for more support, more leadership. I'm prepared to answer any questions that you'd like. We have done okay, but it's not good enough. And we will continue to work with our team, the Afghan Strategic Evacuation Team, along with a number of other key Veterans Transition Network, Afghan Canadian interpreters, a number of other key organizations. We want to team up with people to help bring these Afghans out. So I'm open to questions. Again, very passionate about this situation, and I just feel as Canadians we can do that much better.
Thank you very much, Major.
Thank you,
General Milner. Appreciate that. Is the bells ringing, Madam Clerk? So do I have how many minutes do we have right now? Do I have the consent to go till 5:30 with this and then stop?
5:30 your time?
Oh, yeah, 8:30. Right. So as Madam Kwan gets her 6 minutes as well. Is it okay? Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. So without wasting any more time, I'm gonna go to first round. And Mr. Raf, please be time sensitive and 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair. And first off, my thanks to both General Milner and General Fraser and Oliver Thorne, the witnesses, for being here, especially the generals, all of you. I believe you all had time in uniform, but Your service is greatly appreciated, especially in Afghanistan, and everything you have done over the last year, well, coming on to a number of months anyway, since last summer to help get these Afghans out. Look, I really want to focus on these issues that, General Milner was getting to.
Bring my jacket? Bring my jacket.
Your chair, you're not on mute. All right, there you go. Thank you. About how foreseeable this situation was. I know that the generals, you penned that letter, but I mean, we had intelligence information. We knew when President Trump had indicated that this was going to happen. The intelligence and all the sources were indicating that this was quite a possibility. Do you think the government of Canada should have taken action sooner?
Is that open to any one of us?
It is. Go ahead, General.
Yeah, the short answer is yeah, we saw this coming. If 3 retired generals without access to intelligence saw this coming in July, there could have been a lot more people evacuated out of Afghanistan before Kandahar fell and before Kabul fell. And this is again on the shoulders of Canadians, and I don't mean just the military, that we could have actually done more. And since the fall of Afghanistan and since the closure of the air bridge, there's certainly a lot more we could have done to bring out. I think that's about 7,000 in total. About maybe 5,000 are actually in this country to actually meet that 40,000 deadline or 40,000 target. We can do better than this.
Thanks, General. Can you elaborate, you or General Milner, on the impact of closing the embassy and how, when it got closed, and how that just added to the confusion and the chaos of trying to do the coordination of this mission, and the sort of lack of support from the diplomatic side of the House?
I can jump in there. It's General Milner. Thanks. Great question. That was a huge challenge. We moved our embassy out way too fast. There's no doubt in my mind. As a matter of fact, we were the first embassy to depart. That was very embarrassing for a lot of us on the ground. They could have been a lot of help. I know that I was working with a number of them in the embassy, and all of a sudden, boom, they were gone. I think that we could have reacted quicker. I do compare, there is comparisons with the Syrian mission, because I was involved in that one where we pulled 25,000 out. We put an aggressive whole of government team on the ground with the military, with IRCC, and we threw them a whole bunch of money, and we pulled people out, and there was no bureaucracy. There wasn't all this paperwork to pull out the critical people. We could have pulled people third-party location, and there's no doubt in my mind we would have managed to get a lot more people out. So yes, a number of things could have been done a lot better than they were, and absolutely moving the embassy out was embarrassingly way too fast.
Thanks, General Milner, and I'll maybe come back to you or General Fraser here about the comments about the lack of the lack of leadership, not one department, not one minister. My understanding and my background, I know you guys were well tied into the Canadian Armed Forces capabilities. They could have done more sooner. We've had testimony that there was forces prepared to go in and start to get Afghans out sooner. But would you attribute to a lack of a political will, or just the lack of one minister sort of taking the bull by its horns and actually doing the coordination function that needed to happen to make this, considering we had immigration, foreign affairs, defense, everybody involved?
Simplistically, it's all of the above. And Canada was the world leader during the combat mission when we were there, when we created a super deputy minister, and we had an interdepartmental task force where it actually harnessed the power of the whole of government team, where it actually brought tremendous strategic credit to this nation. When this crisis was unfolding right in front of our eyes, we have then, and as we do now, urged the government to create an interdepartmental task force with one leader. There has to be one minister that has a preeminent authority and responsibility to manage across the different departments the need of IRCC, Global Affairs Canada, safety and defense, the resources necessary to pull out these Afghans out of the country and back to this country safely, so we have the right people. We need to repeat what we've already done in the past. Over.
Yeah, thanks.
And I would just add real quick. I mean, those are great points. There's got to be a plan, and we've offered a plan, but we just have not seen that plan. We have not seen a government plan with the leadership to execute. We've seen bits and pieces from a number of people. We actually wrote a plan and offered that plan. But again, we did not see that plan taken. And again, we just never did see a plan from the government. We were really hoping to see that. So I just add that. Thank you.
Thanks, generals. Thank witnesses. Chair, I understand my time's up. My last request would be, could the generals table their letters with the clerk? I know General Fraser indicated he sent it, but the clerk seems to indicate she doesn't have it. So General Fraser, General Milner, Mr. Thorne, could you table your opening remarks with the committee, please?
Mr. Raf, I'm going to ask a quick question. And the members who are present in the committee room, or anyone, that is there any will that they can go and vote personally in the House of Commons? Then I have to adjust the time. No? If no, then I'm going to carry on. Thank you. The next speaker, honorable member, Mr. Baker, for 6 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I want to thank our witnesses for being here today. Generals Fraser and Milner, thank you for your service in Afghanistan and throughout your careers for this country. And Mr. Thorne, thank you for being here as well and for all that you've been doing. Gentlemen, you know, what I'm really interested in is as much as possible is how we help folks now, right? I mean, I think you've articulated quite clearly, General Fraser, especially in your opening remarks, why folks need help. And I think what I'm interested in is how we do that going forward. And if you don't mind, I'd like to focus my questions on that. I'd like to start by just asking, what are the greatest challenges to helping folks now, and how do we overcome them? And and anyone can take that question.
I'd like to jump in if I can. Okay, so General Fraser's outlined the fact it's a horrible situation over there. It continues to get worse. We can't trust the Taliban. We know that for a fact. I mean, the bottom line is that we do need a plan. We need a whole of government plan. This is big. I mean, we need GAC, we need IRCC, we need the whole team, the forces to get together. You know, the Prime Minister has said 40,000 people. We have 10,000 that are still over there in these horrible conditions. The bottom line is that we do need a plan, and we need a lead. We need to get people on the ground. We need to get people into Pakistan. There's a number of things that can be done, but they need to be done quickly. We hear it's a priority. We hear from cabinet meetings that it's a priority, but we just do not feel that there's a priority. So we're willing to help. We have great people that are willing to help. It's very difficult for us to see things happening in Immigration Canada and across the government. We have great people that are willing to help. We've got people we can put on the ground and help the situation. We did that, and that's how we pulled out some of these tremendous Afghans. So all that being said, we've written another letter to Minister Fraser asking to speak to him, to offer assistance. No response, zero response. It's embarrassing. So, I mean, we'd like to help. And I'm sure that both Oliver and General Fraser would say the same things. We want to help more, and we would just like to see some leadership, a team, a plan. We love plans. Plans will help us execute and get things done.
General, I appreciate that, and again, I have about 3 minutes left, so I will ask the next question, and it really is just another. I want to ask again, and is I hear you, General, and I appreciate that. I think what I'm I mean, you're speaking to me now, and I want to learn, and I want to be able to raise the right points with the minister as well. So if you were developing that plan, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but what are some of the key things, right? Like I'm hearing about challenges like getting folks out of Afghanistan into Pakistan, for example. Is that correct? Is that a challenge? How do we overcome that? I understand that IRCC, Immigration Canada, has been trying to help folks once they reach Pakistan. Is that working? What more do we need to do? These are some of my questions, but what are the elements of that plan? That's what I really want to know. How do we help the folks now that we are where we are?
If I may, I think I have a few suggestions along that line. So these are in order of preference as well, if you will. I talked earlier about risk aversion, and I think that's one of the big challenges that's getting in the way of bringing people to Canada. And the way that challenge manifests is in biometric verification for applicants to the Special Immigration Measures Program. So without the ability to deliver biometrics in country, which we cannot do without a Canadian consular presence, that means they have to go to a third country before they can come to Canada. That means then that we have to deal with all the paperwork requirements to get them into that third country. Remember, most of the individuals that we're talking to do not have passports. Without a passport, they can't get a visa. Without a visa, they can't go into the country. So, but again, these are some pieces that the government seems reticent to implement because they're a risk aversion. So the ideal solution would be the ability to bring people to Canada without biometric verification and do the verification in Canada. That's the best solution. If that's not possible, a solution to biometrics in country in Afghanistan is the second best solution. If not, enhanced communication, at least with neighboring countries so that we can get people into those countries and do biometrics as quickly as possible. So things like a laissez-passer, a single-use travel document that Canada could issue to Afghans to move into Pakistan, UAE, Tajikistan, anywhere where we have the ability to then provide biometric identification. And the last thing I'll put in a plug for is for the Canadian government through Global Affairs to continue funding organizations within ASET like Aman Laura that are doing this evacuation work. And as much as possible, expanding what those funds can be used for. At the moment, they cannot be used for temporary accommodations, which are desperately needed because of government policy. Anything that the government can do to relax those constraints on the funding they're providing to organizations will be enormously helpful.
Okay, Thank you very much, Mr. Baker. I appreciate that. Now we will go to Mr. Brunel Desapp for 6 minutes. Please be sharp on time.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Thank you to our witnesses who are here. Thank you for your service. Thank you for what you've done on the ground and what you've been doing since the beginning of the crisis. It's very appreciated. Now, General, you said you didn't get a response from Minister Fraser. Mr. Thorne, Mr. Fraser said something similar. Mr. Baker, with all due respect, he said he's going to talk to the minister, but I've got good news for you, gentlemen. Tomorrow at the Immigration Committee, we will be having Minister Fraser before us, and so I'm giving you the opportunity tonight to give me the question that you'd like me to ask him tomorrow during that committee. And I'd like to hear from the three of you on this. What question would you like me to ask Minister Fraser tomorrow at the Immigration Committee? You can give me your questions, and I guarantee you that at least one of your questions will be asked. So I'd like to hear from the three of you on that.
The first thing I would ask is, what is the plan? What is the plan to get the 40,000 Afghans to this country? When is that plan going to be executed? What are the monthly metrics of how many people do you want to have coming out of Afghanistan to come to this country? If biometrics is such a hard thing, we've got some of the greatest technology companies in the world in this country so that we can actually have secure technology such that the data never goes into the country. It is a dumb machine that is transmitting the data with telecommunications back to a safe location where it never goes out and never gets exposed. Use technology to get across the biometric issues. But what is the plan? What is the milestone? And stop sending emails. Be transparent with the Afghan applicants and start talking to them person to person. All right? Great Britain, United States, France, Ukraine sent people into Kabul to grab people out of the country. Canada sent an email. That's not good enough. Let's open up the lines and talk to real people, and start talking to these people and giving them hope and opportunity to gain. Over.
Est-ce que M. Thorne, vous aviez une question?
Mr. Thorne, would you have a question to be asked of the minister tomorrow? You can ask it through me.
Thank you, sir. I think General Fraser summed it up admirably. I think the only piece I would add is to really hammer that question of biometrics. What is the solution to biometrics? What is on the table? Again, the ideal solution is to bring people without biometrics to Canada and do that after the fact. But if not, a biometric solution in country would be better.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup.
Tellement important, ce comité.
Thank you very much. This is a very important committee. We want to help people right now and as quickly as possible. It's very appreciated. And if there's one thing that I'd like to know, Mr. Thorne, perhaps you could tell me, given your responsibilities, how this is important to think about. How do veterans react when they gave their word to their Afghan collaborators? How did those Canadian veterans feel about their collaborators? I think it's important to ask that question.
Thank you very much for the question. And it's absolutely one that's important to be asked. A great deal of frustration, in some cases, desperation. Our day-to-day job before the last 6 months was helping veterans with mental health. And already throughout the process in the fall of Afghanistan, we saw the impact of that on their mental health, on their well-being, to the point where we brought together our clinical network from across Canada to do some additional training and consultation on this, because it was a topic that was coming up again and again in the programs that we continue to run. But how specifically does the issue of interpreters impact veterans? It impacts them right at home, because the interpreters are reaching out to Canadian Forces veterans, asking them for help, asking them to help them with their applications, to help provide letters of reference so that they can be vetted and approved to come to Canada. But in many cases, they're also providing them with funding. They're helping them book travel plans. They're giving their own money to pay for them in temporary accommodations, whether it's in Kabul or in Pakistan or somewhere else on their journey to Canada. So this is impacting them enormously. And I'll give one example. We have a veteran who's been a longtime supporter of our organization. His name's Trevor Street. He lives here in British Columbia. And he spent tens of thousands of dollars of his own money in July to take out ad campaigns in newspapers in Ottawa with a photo of his interpreter who was killed by the Taliban, saying, "Why has a program not been announced?" in July. And we see examples like that all across Canada, and we speak to dozens of veterans over the previous months who have had some deep level of involvement helping their personal interpreters, and to not be able to help them and to see them still waiting to come out here where they're getting messages daily talking about how dangerous it is incredibly detrimental to the mental health of Canada's veterans.
Est-ce que j'en comprends donc?
So am I to understand that, well, it affects people directly because these are people who help them in Afghanistan, but that means that this affects the mental health of veterans. This creates anxiety, and they feel accountable to those people, but they can't help them because their government isn't acting. What is your biggest disappointment, gentlemen, faced with this for this government?
Sorry, Madam Kwan, go to you for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I want to thank all the witnesses for both your service and your incredible work and ongoing advocacy. You're absolutely correct that I think the government dropped the ball. I still remember when the Minister of Immigration, the former Minister of Immigration, was asked a question about resettlement. Their response was to say that they can use the existing immigration measures, which we know was not going to be possible. Now, with that being said, moving forward about what can be done and what needs to be done. I guess my first question is, have you proposed to the government about waiving the biometrics? Because that is absolutely paramount, to waive the administrative and paperwork requirement. And if so, what's their response? Mr. Thorne?
I would actually defer to my colleagues, General Fraser and Milner, as they've had more direct communication with the government on this.
I can jump in real quick. We've given a number of recommendations on that.
General Fraser, go ahead.
We've made all those recommendations. We said we will work with the government on options on how to do that. And fundamentally, we agreed nobody should come into this country that shouldn't be here. So you waive it at that end and you isolate them, and then you do all the necessary biometrics and all the necessary due diligence so we get the right people here. And if they don't meet the requirements, you send them home. You send them back to Afghanistan. But the thing is, take them out of harm's way, get them, do the vetting, bring them here, and then, or to a third party. We made all those recommendations, but the risk aversion is it's in the too hard column to do.
Would you be able to
And
table
it's
for
taken
the
too long.
Would you be able to table for the committee the recommendations that you've made to the government so that we have that on the public record with the committee?
Yeah, we can come up with all the letters and then recommendations, because we still talk to IRCC and Global Affairs on a weekly basis, where we make all these recommendations. And also, when the Interdepartmental Task Force was up and running, we gave them the same recommendations.
Thank you.
And I would just add, if I can, I mean, I think it's an opportunity for the government to be aggressive. You know, we've talked biometrics. They can put a team on the ground, a big team over in somewhere like Pakistan, just very similar to what we did with Syria. We put in a whole of government team, and you can actually do a lot of it right there on the ground. I mean, we'll continue to pull people out. I mean, it's not the perfect spot, you know, Pakistan, but, you know, there's a place that we continue to move people to. But yes, I mean, we can table recommendations. We continue to push our recommendations through the lower levels of Immigration Canada, because we cannot really get the right people in immigration to speak to us. So we don't know how far our recommendations are going up the chain of command, but we're absolutely critical or key to give you anything that we can to assist. We can recommend plans. We've done this before. We're prepared to do that.
I was just going to say, because given your experience, you have done that before with the Syrian initiative most recently. And because of that mobilization, we were able to actually bring people to safety. If the government supported that effort right now and took the same approach as they did under the Syrian refugee initiative, would you be able to do that work with Afghanistan?
I would say absolutely yes. So we've actually had people recommend and offer their services that did the exact same thing in Syria. I mean, I could call up somebody that would go in there in a heartbeat who led the operations for Syria, so that there's people out on the ground that will help. And again, yes, we can assist. We've recommended plans. So yes, 100% on standby to continue to assist.
With respect to the evacuation, some of the sorry, I shouldn't say evacuation, the bringing people to safety. Some of the collaborators, interpreters, and so on may have served in a different frame or a different realm. However, not all of them are being recognized by the government in terms of their resettlement support. So from that perspective, how many people do you think fall into that bracket, and what should the government do about that? Should there be policy changes with respect to that?
We have recommended to the government to be as inclusive as possible. And the criteria that the IRCC and the policy has right now are fairly broad. It gets kind of iffy when you talk about human rights. But for journalists, for women, for ethnic minorities, for LGBTQ, for cultural advisors, for interpreters, cooks, there are enough conditions there that we can probably get them here. We should be more inclusive than exclusive. But again, it goes back to the comment earlier that was made. We're too risk adverse.
Do you think that the government should, for example, allow for Canadians to sponsor loved ones that are there, that are extended families? I've had people tell me that their cousin, for example.
Point of order, Chair. Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Kwan, but there's only a minute and 50 seconds left until the vote.
Thank you very much, Madam Kwan. You almost got your 6 minutes. On behalf of the committee members, I would love to thank both General Fraser, General Miller, and Mr. Thorne for appearing on the committee and for your input to the committee. Thank you kindly.
Mr. Chair,
And
Mr. Chair, before you wrap, could I ask the witnesses to send their written answers to my that last question with respect to sponsorship and extending it beyond parents, grandparents, and spouses and dependent children, and beyond the collaborators and interpreters.
Thank you, Madam Kwan, and I would like to call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.